Hello and welcome back to Stories for Wonderful Children. I'm Dan Wendelin, your host and storyteller. Tonight we continue the ongoing tale of Myra and the online school for adventuring. Myra has finally arrived at the mysterious and abandoned Temple of the Fates. Will she find the answers that she and her friends seek there? I hope you enjoy listening to find out. Myra walked up the steps into the Temple of the Fates. She walked through the doorway from the main porch and stopped for a moment as her eyes adjusted to the gloom within. There were windows all around the room with stained glass that admitted enough light that she could see pretty well. It was a single vast room with doorways leading off from it. In the center of the room was dominated by an enormous statue showing three figures with a sort of thread-like ribbon running around and between them. Myra looked around, trying to make sure that there weren't any dangers that she should be aware of, but nothing moved within, and so she crept across the great open space until she reached the statue in the middle. The figures were hooded, but each of them looked a little different even within the hoods, and they all seemed to be carefully attending to the thread that ran between them. There was writing around the base of the statue. She leaned forward and tried to make it out, but it was too dim for her to really see well until she leaned forward and began to trace the letters, and she could make out after a moment that one of them said life, and one of them said thought, and one of them said destiny, and each of those words seemed to be at the feet of one of the figures. So Myra thought to herself, that must be the names of the fates, life, thought, and destiny. She looked around and continued to explore the sanctuary. She noticed that the thread that the fates were handling sort of actually ran in a spiral down off the base of the statue and was sort of engraved onto the floor in a great spiral that spread out throughout the whole room. She stood in the middle of the statue and turned in a slow circle, and she saw that the big room was divided into 7 walls. There was the one that she had come in through, and then standing with her back to that, there were 3 walls to her left and 3 walls to her right. Above each of the walls were depictions of different activities of daily life, and she saw that engraved lifeline thread that had spiraled out across the floor spiraled up the walls and appeared as a recurring motif in each of the stained glass windows, showing all the different activities of life. Each of the stained glass windows seemed to be concerned with a different aspect of life. Like one of them showed a lot of things like farming and nurturing animals. One of them showed what were clearly like family life scenes. One of them showed what seemed to be scenes of combat and war, and so on, till all around there were, under each of the stained glass windows to the left, there was a door leading to an alcove off to the sides, and Myra crept over to them and peered in. It was sort of dark inside the alcoves, so she couldn't see much, but she could see that there didn't really seem to be much of anything there. And then she looked at the ones to her right, and she looked into the alcoves there. But the third wall to her right, there was no alcove. And she thought, well, that's strange. She stood back and looked at the window above it, and it took her a minute to sort of decipher what was going on, but she saw what appeared to be like politics with people talking and giving speeches, and the stained glass window also depicted like contracts and laws and judges. And also, she recognized very clearly someone who was supposed to be, seemed to be depicted spying or sneaking up on someone. And she felt drawn to that window. She thought that would be where I would fit in. As she stood there, she wondered, I wonder why this one doesn't have an alcove. Something about it sort of bothered her. She stood there looking, and then she stepped back, and then she moved forward and ran her hands over the wall in the place where the door should be. She didn't feel anything. She looked around again to make sure there was nothing moving or watching her. She didn't see anything, but she also didn't really feel like the place was empty. She walked quickly back across the open space of the central chamber and peeked out the door. Willow was sitting up now. You doing okay? Said Myra. Yeah, said Willow. You find anything? Not yet, said Myra, but there's one more thing I want to check on. You doing okay? It's all quiet out here. I'm just resting, said Willow. All right, said Myra. She headed back to the wall and gently, starting at one corner, wrapped her knuckles across it as she moved every few inches apart. But the wall was very thick, and she couldn't detect any change in sound, no hollowness like there would be a hidden chamber or anything. She stepped back again. She looked down at the floor. She could see the lifeline engraved on the floor, and then she stepped forward and looked at it more carefully. There was one spot where the lifeline was just a little uneven for a moment. She bent way down, and then she ran her fingers across it, eyes closed. There was a seam so subtle she didn't think she would have seen it even in good light, more or less in the dimness of the chamber. She ran her hands around it until the seam at the apex of its curve crossed the lifeline, and she felt a little depression in the lifeline. She slipped her fingers in and felt the tiniest catch. She triggered it, and soundlessly a section of the floor rotated away, revealing steps leading down into an alcove, much like the ones in the other chambers. In that alcove there sat a single gem, of a type that Myra did not recognize. It glowed with the faintest green light, and Myra felt somehow that it called to her. She stepped down into the alcove, every nerve tense. Was this a trap? Was she supposed to be here? She sat down on the bench in front of the gem. She reached out and touched it with a single finger, and the world fell away. It was dark, and then there was the faintest of green light, and standing before her were 3 figures. It was too dim to really make them out, but Myra knew in her heart that these were destiny and life and thought. They seemed to speak with 3 voices as one in her mind. The voices said, "We see all things on the lifeline, things past, things present, things future. We know what is to come and who is coming for us. We know our own destiny, but we do not interfere or intervene, not even on our own behalf. But it is given to us to share our glimpses of the future with those who may benefit. And so, knowing, Myra, that one day you will be here, we wish to tell you that which you should know. You are walking the right path. What you suspect is correct. The origins of your school are indeed wrapped together with our disappearance. To set things right, you must find us and free us, and you must find our lifeline and free it as well. Do these things, and you may restore what has been lost. This is all we may tell you, but we believe that it was all that you will need to do what must be done. And then the green glow faded, and Myra was sitting there in the alcove with Willow shaking her shoulder. "Myra, are you okay?" "What?" said Myra. "Yeah, Willow said, I heard you yelp, and then I came and found you down here, and you weren't moving, and you were touching that gem, and..." "It's okay," said Myra, picking up the gem, its green glow now gone, and slipping it into a pouch. "I've found what we needed. Let's go home." They headed out of the temple. Myra said, "Are you good for the flight home?" "I am," said Willow. "Thanks for letting me rest." "Thanks for making sure we got here," said Myra. And on the flight back, she filled Willow in on what she had found. She was looking forward to making it back to campus. Somehow, just knowing that they were on the right track made it seem all much easier. And that's the end. Thanks for listening to Stories for Wonderful Children. I created today's show, but questions and running commentary were supplied by my children. The theme music was created by Brandon Thompson, and our wonderful logo was designed by Silas Swindelin. If you know someone who might enjoy the show, please tell them about it. Do you want more stories? You can now subscribe to the show and help pick a new story for me to tell every month. The show's website is storiesforwonderfulchildren.com. Until next time, I'm Dan Wendelin, reminding you to tell someone you love a story.